Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. First, just a little bit about Stratagon. We're an integrated marketing and technology firm and a proud HubSpot Platinum partner. And happy to be here today to speak with you a little bit around or about the higher education space and how HubSpot is a critical tool for us and our clients, as well as hopefully for many of you on the call. So the primary focus today will be around the alignment of recruitment strategies. So as you well know, there is this element of the strategic part of recruitment and admissions, and then there's also the tool set. So hopefully we're going to find a really good balance in that today. We're going to first kick it off with talking about the challenge that enrollment officers face, just to kind of set the stage a bit. And then we're going to move into the enrollment journey, dive into digital communications, and that's where we'll hit some of the actual realities of the tool and some of the best practices that we have come across over the years. And then we'll wrap up with some common recruitment marketing challenges and hopefully give you a few tools to overcome them. So aligning the recruitment strategy. So, the challenge at hand. When you look at some of the studies that have been published in recent years, some of the top reasons enrollment officers say they are not satisfied with their jobs center around unrealistic expectations that are being placed upon them from the institution at large. The workload is just simply too high, and topping off these three are just too few resources. So part of what we are trying to do is to figure out how do we manage within that reality. And if you dive a little deeper into those statistics, we find that tuition-based revenues are stagnant and in some cases declining. Competition is really, really fierce. One of the things that have become obvious over the last decade or so is we no longer had the luxury of assuming that an applicant or a student within our backyard was pretty much we had a really high probability of landing that student, other than other institutions that were also in the backyard. So our competitive set was very different and a bit more finite. In today's world, the competition includes online degree programs, some local, some national, and in some cases could even be global. So that competitive reality has changed the game when you think about the recruitment cycle. Students have also, now have the ability to apply to many colleges and universities en masse through things like Common App. So all of a sudden now, where a student would apply to one or two universities or colleges in their local area or just another one of choice, they now can hit a button and they have really, really broad access to a lot of universities. And that simply adds more students to everyone's population and gives them more things to manage, while those resources that we talked about are not necessarily being increased. And ultimately, administration, they want to yield, more enrollment and just increase yield overall. So the enrollment journey, first and foremost, we want to consider the student. Hold on one second. When we consider the student, one of the things we obviously know is that digital communications will be a really, really huge element of it. And you may ask yourself, where does marketing automation actually fit, particularly when you think about the on-the-ground recruitment efforts? So one of the things is that we want to make sure that digital efforts enhance these face-to-face interactions that are naturally happening. So put yourself in the shoes of the recruitment officer or the recruiter. One of the things we oftentimes see is there's an opportunity to automate or just improve that experience of data collection while you're in the field at high school, college fairs, so that we can help automate things so that when we get back to the institution, the next sequence of communications are somewhat premeditated and ready to go versus having to come back to the office or back to the university, reconcile that data, and then think about what's next.
So I think we skipped a few there. Sorry about that, guys.
Okay. So if you think about the path to enrollment, this is a very common flow of information, and depending on where you are and what your needs are within your respective university, the attract phase is oftentimes at the very front end of introducing your institution to a student who may not necessarily have you on their radar. One of the things that we oftentimes see, though, is the convert stage is a really tough and challenging area. So customers will come to us and they actually have, by way of things like Common App or their overall recruitment efforts, they have a lot of students in their pipeline, but they don't have the ability to walk them through the admissions process and get them actually converted to either enrolled or even approved students. So given that, you may find that your need to focus on convert could be higher than even attract. The good thing about all of these is that HubSpot has a series of tools. We use, of course, landing pages. We're using forms for being able to collect data, calls to actions, and then getting into ad retargeting using integrations like Facebook and LinkedIn, for example, if we were actually targeting parents, and a number of other tools in that convert stage. And we have two conversion points: one from the applicant, and then the other conversion point is actually at the point of enrollment, and that's the ultimate conversion point that we like. You'll get a chance to see a more detailed map of this type of thing later on in the talk, where you'll get a chance to see where personalized emails as well as high utilization of workflows can really automate your processes here and hopefully drive a lot of efficiencies that help you combat this reality of more to do with stagnant resources or perhaps even less. But one of the last things we don't want to forget is once you actually have a student and they've enrolled is we want to leverage that population and delight them as they're there and also get them to be promoters of your brand to other students who may be coming into the pipeline, and more on that later as well. All right, I think we covered this one already, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Cassie.
Hey everyone, I'm Cassie Whitman. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, which is mainly the main meat of our presentation here, about those digital communications and how they align directly to the enrollment journey and to the student along the way. So we'll kind of talk about strategy at a high level and how we bridge that with all these awesome HubSpot tools to make a really nice streamlined approach and some very efficient ways that we can begin to recruit our prospects or students. All right, so just to set it up a little bit, I'll share a few stats. So students, as probably most of you know or are figuring out, are more likely to consider institutions that use digital strategies. They're getting more used to that consistent conversation. So we found out too, obviously, as you guys know, it doesn't just start senior year or even post-graduation. 55% of juniors and 60% of those seniors are the ones who are looking for that digital interaction. So what do we know? What else do we know about our prospects today or our students? We do know as of right now, like using video and social is definitely a must. They're very visual and they're very engaged when they see things that interest them or excite them or give them the information they need to succeed. So there's a few stats here that highlight some of those things. 59% visit college websites on mobile at least once a week. So I wanted to pull that out because using a tool like HubSpot or building maybe your website on the COS or using the tools that are on those COS just automatically give you the opportunity to visit them where they are, which is mobily. Everything is mobile optimized, looks great on mobile. It makes it very easy and a very seamless transition for your students that go from the desktop, or maybe the parents that come in from the desktop, to then to a mobile device like a phone or an iPad. We're also still seeing very consistent audience on Facebook, believe it or not. We're just seeing even more now on Instagram and YouTube and those sorts of things as well. So these users are really adept and love their mobile research. Try not to skip any more here. So 60% of high school students are discovering college and universities via a search engine. So search engine optimization is key as well. 70% of high school students prefer email at each phase of the enrollment journey. So this just kind of solidifies the communication. It solidifies they're making the right steps and interacting with the universities and trying to figure out really where they want to go. 60% of students have also liked or followed the school that they're considering. They want to keep up with the conversation. They want to see your school culture. They want to learn about those important deadlines and dates. And a very easy, non-intrusive way to be able to get to them is on social media, using story features, sharing stories of students, and using your students to share their content as well. So we'll spend a minute on this slide. It's a little bit detailed, and you guys are going to get this too as well. But this is basically a visual of a high-level communications plan. Obviously, there are many different steps that you can take, and it's going to be a custom journey depending on your institution. But just to call out a few things here that we think are really important. So a few things. Want to make sure if you have the opportunity to get in touch with those students before they're seniors, before they're the ones reaching out. Some ways that we have seen people do that, clients and examples, are leveraging maybe summer programs that you're already communicating with these people. They've been to their institution and they know you. We also need to remember to think about aligning our communication and plan and efforts with one, if you can, with the admissions team, if you're actually doing recruitment efforts for an individual school within an institution, or the people in the field, on the ground, the people that are going to those high school college fairs and they're interacting with your students. It's a really good opportunity for you to take those digital assets and combine them with that face-to-face to really close the loop in your communications. Over the next few years, there are several opportunities you'll have to engage with them. So maybe they're at a career fair and they're with a recruitment officer and they're filling out an inquiry on an iPad. Gives you the opportunity to send them to a landing page form to get more information. Then maybe you're sending out an email to them saying, hey, it was great to meet you. And the great thing with things like HubSpot, you have the opportunity to personalize that for maybe even the person that they met. You can send them an email with a link to a video that talks about experience. So this is a really, really good way to start to build that plan at a high level and connect it with those people in the field. And this is really where it all starts. All of this communication, the segmentation, the messaging, all starts with one, really knowing your target audience and your persona, and then developing that communications plan and all those vital touch points to make them feel comfortable with the enrollment journey. So this is kind of the place we start at the beginning of the recruitment cycle. There are a lot of opportunities to delight them along the way, but this is just a really good place to start. So next slide, we're going to talk about what are the must-dos. So we're going to talk about the must-do in segmentation for proper messaging, and then we're also going to talk about consistent messaging. So those are the two overall sort of messages that we're talking about, and we'll have little individual things that we talk about how to help those things in between. And the overall idea is that HubSpot is helping you to bridge the gap in a heavy workload, not having enough resources, and really getting to the student where they are. So the first one we're going to talk about is establishing a naming convention and a labeling guide, getting a handle on your suppression, giving you that security of that stopgap and making sure that certain students aren't receiving certain messages and the right ones are. Of course, segmenting your students, which is a little bit different than suppression. It's just segmenting your students so you can tailor the message. And it gives all kinds of opportunity to use HubSpot's personalization and smart content features to really talk to them about what their interests are, what their majors are, and maybe what their intended enrollment time is. And the next one in this section is also including the parents, include the guardians. You may even want to look at a separate communications plan just for this group of people. They have different interests, they have different concerns, but all in all, both audiences have the same goal. So first, let's talk about establishing labeling and naming convention. It seems like something that's like at the base level of sort of what we do, but we found that over the years, this is really important for several reasons. One, you may be sharing a portal with another school in your institution, and it's really important to differentiate your messages between schools. So you don't want the business school messages going out to the pharmacy school or whatever it may be. You want to make sure you have that there, and organization is key. HubSpot has some really great ways that you can organize within your portal. So first, establishing a guide is what we do, whether that's brackets before saying that this is a specific one for this school, or naming specific lists that go with specific campaigns. We found that putting everything into a campaign is the best way because HubSpot gives you the ability to measure those metrics and analytics along the way, but also kind of keeps everything in a nice little tight package. So you get the analytics, You see all of your assets working together, and then you can be sure that everything is consistent. So use your HubSpot campaigns to tag those related marketing assets so you can easily do all of those things. And HubSpot just about lets you name everything, which I love. So naming your list the way you want to, naming an email based on internal guidelines that you have, and making sure you do that appropriately and consistently. This is also really important if you're a school working with admissions and vice versa. You want to make sure there's a lot of communication there. So the next thing we're kind of talking about here is suppression lists and suppression settings in your workflows. So it's really vital to set up your own suppression list and to create standards or rules around which you'll suppress people. So an example that we have here is that an automatic active list in HubSpot upon import is set up so that anyone who has a specific admissions code being denied, in this case, is going to a suppression list. And then it's a standard on all of our campaigns, workflows, and email communications that we are automatically suppressing those people as the admissions information is updated. There may be different ways to do it depending on how you handle that, admissions codes and et cetera, and those sorts of things. But a concept as a whole is really to make sure that we're communicating with the right people at the right time. The last thing you want is a communication going out to someone who maybe isn't coming or has been denied, and we're talking about how we're excited to see them. That's the last thing we want. So it's really, really important to set up those enrollment guides or suppressions. HubSpot, again, with their ability to customize and their ability to add those kind of stopgaps in between, make it a lot more of a comfortable process for someone who's in there executing on a daily basis and is setting up those rules in the beginning. So this may be for already enrolled students. Like, you don't want to tell somebody, we're really excited for you, you need to pay your enrollment fee to secure your priority housing, when in fact they've already secured their priority housing. So really setting up their suppression list really help with that. We create an internal written process around these guides to suppress, and it just depends on what message you're sending, and it depends on your admissions. So the next thing we want to do is segment your students and create those active lists here. So utilizing these active lists will ensure automation takes place for putting the right contact into the right list. So HubSpot gives us all these awesome tools to automate and to get those messages out to our students, but we need to make sure that we're creating those segmentation rules and lists before, so that the automation works for us. What we put in is what we get out, in a sense. So we want to make sure that we have all of that set up. And you have the ability to create lists based on many different field opportunities in HubSpot. So creating these specific lists and segmenting your students, maybe by interest. Have they done a program in the summer? By major, to talk to them about more opportunities within their major to get them excited, or maybe where they are in the admissions process. So match your personas, lists, and HubSpot properties to your admissions process, so you can easily segment that data into your smart active lists. Have they completed their FAFSA? No? Time to send the FAFSA information along to them. Were they awarded a scholarship? Well, let's look at our list and see how many people are there and net new into the list. Then we can create and send those email communications along with that. Don't forget to include your guardians in your messages. We've gotten many questions in the past about what is the proper way to get them involved. I would say best practices for us is to definitely include a communications plan for your parents and for your guardians. And you don't have to start on a massive level. You can just start with a few messages that get them excited about their student engaging with your institution. You can let them know about important deadlines that involve them, like filling out the FAFSA. Maybe you tell them, hey, your student won an award, and because they haven't let them know yet. So you want to get them involved into the conversation, even if maybe their student doesn't necessarily want to, because usually parents and guardians have a really big play in this sort of scenario, and they want to know just as much information as their students do. This is another really great way to talk about how HubSpot works with third parties and integrates these other awesome tools for you to be able to easily use. So in the past, we've used a text feature with Call Loop to be able to pull in that information and to send out to parents like updated, real just-in-time SMS messages. So maybe it's a countdown to filling out the FAFSA, or maybe it's a countdown letting them know, hey, your student only has a few more days left to secure their priority housing. What can we do to help you aid, in that process? Another one we've used, there's Postalytics, which is a great one that you can pull in, and you can send direct mail through that as well. So through the combination of text, direct mail, and email communication, and being able to pull all of that together in HubSpot is really helpful and sort of rounds out the entire communications process to these people. Alex, do you have anything to add to that piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an area that we find is very much underutilized, and these are just two potential partners. There are several others on the integration exchange that you can go out to your integration portal and find. But these things are really, really powerful when you think that you now have the ability to send an individual message or an individual direct mail piece based upon a very discrete action that did or did not happen within your digital framework. That's pretty powerful. And I think oftentimes, because we are very pro-digital and we operate in a digital-first environment, that we forget that on occasion, direct mail may be the appropriate use. And we have used this when we have found that we're sending emails and we're not getting the response that we want. Then we have workflows set up to send that one direct mail piece or that one letter by way of HubSpot based upon actions that we are getting or are not getting from, in this case, the parent or guardian, or even the prospective student.
Thank you. So our kind of second must-do section is consistent messaging. So you have these awesome workflows set up, you have your email communications, you're pulling in text messages, maybe you're showing some ads out there, you're talking about your direct mail piece. But in the end, it's really important to have the proper messaging to reach everyone where they are. So in our findings, we found that personalization for reach is key, giving them resources that they really want and they really need. Finding a consistent cadence in that communication is another challenge. And then, of course, important date reminders. That's a big one. So we'll talk about each one of those individually. So the first one is personalization for a better student experience. HubSpot makes it super easy to be able to make a highly customizable and personal experience with your digital communications with those prospective students. Gone are the days of creating 15 emails for one communications because you're talking about 5 different scholarships and 3 different tiers or whatever that may be. You can actually dynamically pull that in with HubSpot. This is an example on the right here where we have pulled in a specific scholarship that a student has been awarded. So this goes out when we know it from admissions, the people who have received those, in this example, Tuskegee scholarships, and it actually tells them what individual award they've won and then leads them to a landing page that gives them more detail about their specific award. So you don't always have to have them engage just with the email and have a super long email with communication. You can put in several different personalization points that shows them exactly what they want and they need, or you can send them to a landing page on email to track engagement and then give them more detail about what they want, kind of furthering them along that enrollment journey that we talked about in the process. So honestly, this is really just one example. But a couple other fun things you can do in the personalization line, just a little tidbit. We have found across the board when we use emojis in our subject line, just a little thing, but HubSpot has these great little features that you can put in, and using a money bag to talk about scholarships, the clicks and the opens increase. It's just proven what we've done. We did it when they first came out with it. We did a fun little A and B test. We send the same communication, the same content, and we sent it to a subset with a subject line with emojis and without, and we saw a consistent increase in those interactions with that. So it's really kind of also giving them the content and the visuals, like we talked about in the beginning, that they can relate with. So a money bag, in this case, you got the Tuskegee Golden Tigers. We had a tiger in there. Just a fun little way. Think about being creative and think about the student and the messaging, but think about the overall experience too. And something as little as an emoji in the subject line can be the difference between them engaging or not. So it's really about knowing your audience as well. So the next one here, we talk about resource. Resources. This can get a little overwhelming because then you have to engage someone to do content. You want to engage a graphic designer to make everything look great. But you really can just start with content that you may already have. So some of you here may have a lot of resources that you can use, and that's great. But if you're just starting, start somewhere easy. You know your majors, you know your scholarship and grant details. Pull that together into a nice, concise digital PDF format that you can share via call to action in HubSpot. You can put all those files in HubSpot, and there's so many creative ways that you can use that along your communications plan. We basically have a resource that accompanies almost every communication because people really crave more, reading detail, understanding deadlines. We also found they love checklists. So we have a really big college checklist that talks about the journey from 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. We featured 9th and 10th grade here because we kind of want to reiterate the message that you can start communicating with these people when they're younger, in the 9th and the 10th grade. Don't forget about that counselor group as well. If you have access to talk to high school counselors, they love resources. When we send these sorts of things over, they get put up on the bulletin board, they get sent out via personal messages, they get sent out to the teachers to utilize as well. So don't forget that audience, and don't forget that they really enjoy that stuff, and giving the opportunity to sort of put your brand out there is always great, and being viewed as a thought leader through your resources. Rich content, interactive PDFs, as you see here, the checklist, you can actually check it off digitally. We share this with the parents as well. You may be able to answer their questions before they even get to you. So that's a really good opportunity to sort of streamline your work and not have to worry about many emails back and forth. Also include that content you can have in several types of communications. You have this interactive PDF for online, but you can also think about creating those print versions as well for people who like to actually feel and touch those tangible assets. So the next one we get a question a lot about is about finding a cadence, and I wish I could tell you that I have the answer to all of it, but I can just tell you this communication is 2 days, this communication is a week, this communication is 15 days, and it works perfect every time, but that would be a lie. The not lie is that HubSpot makes it really easy for you to do all of it and to change in the moment. I know that may seem a little bit scary, but as you're learning about your subset of students, and as you know, year over year and sort of generation, this is going to change. So we've even found, working with several clients over several years, that the cadence is going to change depending on who they are, how quickly they interact, how easily they can get a hold of these digital communications. And the fact of the matter, it's a lot easier now, it happens a lot quickly, and the attention span is a lot smaller. So we found that the cadence, even in the last 5 years, has really picked up. We want to make sure we're communicating with them consistently, though, so they feel like you're having sort of a virtual and digital conversation with them. One thing to also definitely point out here is that you have to consider a cadence at each part of the enrollment journey. It's going to be a little bit different. If you have Susie who enters into your enrollment journey and your communications plan in August, maybe a little bit slower. We're nurturing her a little bit more. We're moving her along the process. But then you may have Cassie enter into the enrollment journey in January, and maybe she's a little bit behind, and now you have the same communications you want to get out to her, but it's got to be quick. And there's a little bit of an understanding that, you know, she's starting a little late. Maybe it's a rolling admissions period. You got to get those communications out faster. So we've actually built in some stopgaps internally that after a certain date, when you add in your active list from admissions, that it sends internal communications telling us, okay, team, it's time to switch over to the increased speed workflow process. And that's when we're going into, we're going in the zone and we're getting ready to recruit people as quickly as we can and getting those messages to those net new people who are coming in at the last minute. So hopefully that's somewhat helpful, but it's really important just to know that with HubSpot, you can easily make changes and adjust delays. But to give it sort of consistency, like you really shouldn't be sending a message out in August and then not communicating with them again until November and saying, Happy Thanksgiving, we hope you join us next year for Thanksgiving. You want to make sure that you're constantly talking to them and providing value so that they engage with you and you can nurture them along the way. So the next piece seems also a little bit obvious, but these folks are juggling so many different things. Your students in most cases are applying to several different schools and very easily. So one really great way to stick out above everyone else is to be really diligent and communicative about those dates and deadlines, kind of being their virtual digital assistant and helping them move along the process. For application or admission deadlines, we utilize a lot of countdowns, and we see really high engagement there when we start to do those things. Or call out a due date within the subject line, get the message there right away, and you'll see the little money bag emoji there that I was talking about earlier. Lets them know, boom, money, zoned in, they got money for me, only got 3 days to accept my scholarship, I better move. Really great way to establish a sense of urgency. But just remember, if you start doing countdowns, there may be some expectation that you're going to do that in the future. So we've kind of put that into all of our communications plans because straight up we found that it works. So that's a really good way to do that. It also gives them that little nudge before opening or clicking through when you say those things in the subject line. So remember, be visual when you can, include those dates and be very explicit right to the subject line in the preview text. And again, HubSpot makes it super easy to be able to create these personalized messages quickly and efficiently. As you can see to the left here, just like a little bit of a HubSpot thing. We created this awesome template, but we created it to be efficient. So we can actually switch out these, you see those header images there, that's an image module in HubSpot. We can quickly add in those messages, and it looks good on all those email clients that you have to account for. It looks great on mobile. And then we just know that that image and that header goes with that communication, and you can just switch them out and continue to use a consistent, nice template that you have. So you're not creating 60 different templates for 60 different email communications. Okay, so this is such a little thing, but I had to include it in here, and it's just a little tidbit. This is a huge way to streamline PDF updates. I know it seems so small, but HubSpot has these little like surprise awesome tools all over the place that just make your life easier. You're talking about workload, you're talking about resources. We know in the recruitment cycle, in higher education, just as fast as the digital space is moving, that space is moving as well. And you're constantly making updates to things, new scholarship opportunities, new grants, new clubs, new communications. It can be anything. So if you're creating these awesome assets, these PDFs, these infographics, it makes it really easy to change it without blowing up everything. So this is one of my favorite features. You literally can just directly replace any sort of PDF in File Manager. And think about it. I told you before that we use these PDFs in multitude of email communications across the board. When I go replace it on the file level, it automatically updates across every single communication. This is like the most basic feature. I'm sure the HubSpot, Rebecca's probably like, oh God, this is so just standard. But this is a huge thing when you're the one in there every day, plugging away at these things, making these changes and being able to easily update it and dynamically go across all of your assets is really huge. And HubSpot's constantly coming up with these kind of things to make your life easier. And I'm definitely here for that. And I definitely really enjoy it. And we'll always forever love this feature. So I thought I would just call it out. All right, so I'm going to hand it back over to Alex. He's going to talk about some of these like common recruitment marketing challenges that we have besides some of the things we talked about before.
Thanks, Cassie. Before I jump in, I know that was a lot to digest. Cassie had quite a few different points. And just to remind the audience that if you have any specific questions, please put them in the chat pane. We're making pretty good time. I think we're going to have maybe 10 minutes or so, maybe 15 to entertain any specific questions you have. And we've got several experts on the call, including our team, that can jump in and help you out there. So some of the common recruitment marketing challenges, one of the big ones that we oftentimes see is this notion of how do I manage and segment the parent versus the student. So in HubSpot, if you're a HubSpot user already and you're familiar with the company record as well as the contact record, you may scratch your head a little bit about how do I actually do that? And we of course want to do this because it's all about personalization. So if I am emailing or interacting with a guardian or a parent, then we want the ability to connect that to the prospective student and vice versa. So the next page will give you a bit of a visual and talk about one potential way to do this. Um, Essentially, the approach that we have is we have the parent record and we maintain a student name and email address on that parent record. And we do the same thing on the student record for the parent. So we have a student record and we maintain a parent first name, last name, and email address there. The point of connection is can be any number of things, but for today's purposes, let's just call it a unique household ID. And this may be something that you do by way of a custom field that sits on both of those records. But one easy sleight of hand way is you could use a mock web address because, as you know, the ability of HubSpot is you actually can have a website address be the common thing between a company and a contact. So it's a bit of sleight of hand, but it works quite well. So if you just put a www and a .com on the ends of your unique ID on those records, you essentially have created a parent-child relationship that is quite useful when you think about wanting to track the parent and the student. Certainly, there are multiple ways to attack this, but we wanted to point it out as something that you should think about so that you can maintain some type of relationship between those two records. Another one is making sure that you give your students voice. Oftentimes, Cassie showed a couple or several different examples of content, and we oftentimes hear is like, wow, I don't know where to get my content from. One of the areas that we want to make sure you don't forget is to give your students a voice. So leverage those current students' voices by way of social media, by way of blogs or vlogs with a V. Make sure you're using, video. These things are really, really important to help amplify your experience. Students want to hear from other students. They love to hear from administrators and recruitment officers. That's great, but there's nothing like that first person perspective. So to the extent that you can get a camera, even if it's a low production type of an environment, we all have this wonderful thing called a phone that we carry that has pretty amazing recording capabilities. Use that, and the authenticity of having a low production video is actually quite popular and well received by the student audience. So make sure you use that to your advantage. Cassie?
I was just going to say, just remember to start simple. Like, you don't have to have, it's really awesome to have a great set of assets in your pocket, some really nice produced feeling sort of videos to have kind of overall that maybe talk about your program or talk about your university. But just to go along with what Alex said, I mean, don't be afraid. If you're a recruitment officer, you're in admissions, you're in the field, get out your phone, and through HubSpot and some of the awesome native integrations they have there with video that Alex is going to touch on the next slide, you can very easily follow up with an email or digital communication that then becomes a little bit more human-like. You can have a video and say, hey, it was so great to meet you. I'm looking forward to learning more about you. I'm looking forward to helping you along this process. And just start simple. Start today. I mean, there's just about anything that you can do. You can just start today. You don't have to. It's important to make a plan, and it's important to really know your personas, but just don't hesitate. So talking about video a little bit and bridging into that.
Yeah, so just to double down on video a bit, much like anything in HubSpot, one of the great things that we like about the tool is that we measure. So as Cassie was mentioned earlier, as we learn things, we tweak and we adjust. And video is no different. So many of you may be aware of the recent integration to Vinyard, where Vinyard is a video hosting platform. One of the leading ones in the space is now native within HubSpot. So if you have HubSpot, it's free. It's a part of the package. And having the ability to easily put video into your marketing communications, as well as having the ability to track them very simplistically, we have found to be tremendously helpful. There are a number of wonderful third-party video platforms that you may be using, and we certainly say that's definitely good. But if you're getting, if you're new to the video space and you're just saying, hey, I really need the ability to just jump right in, then I think you'll find using the native video loading as well as tracking feature within HubSpot to be really, really powerful and simplistic for your team to use.
Yes. All right. So I think we actually You want to summarize this part, Alex, and we may be able to hit a couple of the tips and then a couple questions?
Yeah, sure. So just in summary, and as Cassie said, we have a few tips that we can go into as well. Um, think about traditional and modern recruiting methods working together. I mean, this notion of a truly integrated approach is where you're going to get the most power. One of the things that I think we oftentimes see the institutions forgetting is that using HubSpot forms across multiple touch points to make sure that as much of the prospective student information is going into the centralized database as possible is really, really key. So if you are having an on-campus visit, make sure that the person involved with that is using a HubSpot form. That would be great. If you have recruiters that are going in the field, make sure they form or any number of things to the extent that you can centralize that or at least tag it such that when that email address comes across for that student, that you can tie those things together, even back to your SIS, is really, really important. So, leveraging the traditional with the more modern things is something we can see real benefit from. So make sure you use digital to meet students where they are. Different students are on different platforms. They have different ways of communication. Try to find that out as soon as you can in the recruitment cycle so you can cater what you're doing to how they want to communicate. It's kind of a general consumer tip in general, and it's no different here for prospective students. Use marketing automation to work smarter, not harder. The reason that you've got to do a lot of planning on the front end, there's no getting around that because automation doesn't mean that it's easy. But once you have that, your ability to scale goes really, really high. And this is what this is all about. This is about scalability so that you can do a lot more with hopefully the same amount of resources. Hopefully, the resources aren't getting cut too bad. But if you have more work than what you know what to do with, take some time to get into automation, and you'll find that your ROI, around your time will go, through the roof. Last two, target and customize your communications to maximize this ROI. Make sure we use the term inside of Stratagon of let's not learn twice. We use that for our clients, and we encourage our clients to do that for their clients as well. So once you have learned something about a student or guardian or parent, let's make sure we're not having to learn that same information twice, and we're using it so that we can be better communicators, which will ultimately increase yield. And finally, use analytics to show what's working and build your case for additional resources. I can tell you, generally speaking, administrators and people in higher education, they like data and they like to be able to prove what they're doing. So make sure you take advantage of all the wealth of analytics that are available by way of using tools like HubSpot, and use those to your advantage when you go back to secure additional resources. Cassie?
Awesome. So I'm just going to go over, we have a little bit of time. If it's okay with Juliana, you can cut me off. We have about 5 minutes or so to go over a couple little tips of things that we run into in our experience. We make a great sort of overall high-level communications plan, and then we fix some problems, we have solutions to those, and then we get, hey, what about this? What about this? So I'm going to just share with you a couple things there. So I'll go back to this question and answer slide. We weren't sure we're going to have enough time, but I think we're going to go over a couple of these tips. So students aren't engaging with current communications. What now? So we pulled an example from WCU here because I thought it was a great idea. So create opportunities for that viral marketing with collateral and branded materials. So remember how we can use those modern digital ways with those traditional direct mail ways to get people really excited. Send them a sticker, send them a t-shirt, and then share about it on digital. So truly integrate those communications and get kids excited about coming, get them excited about sharing your brand online. It's free advertising for you. Use workflow integrations to send those different forms of communications. And you can even send text to students as well. Another little tip here, don't forget to include high school counselors if you can. It's not just about the guardians, it's not just about the parents. There's a very influential piece there. The high school counselors, the career counselors, those people are helping your students and your prospective students make those decisions. So if you can help make their life easier, they're gonna help make your life easier, and they're gonna send students to you, and your recruitment officers will love you as well. So if you do have access to data and the ability to send a group of counselors and college coaches those messages, make sure to leverage that influence. Even just having a few messages that go out. You definitely don't want to bombard these people because there is a cadence that you have to respect there as well. So just consider that. So you can use some of the same strategies and tactics that we talked about earlier in the presentations to incorporate them into your communications plan as a separate audience. And in this specific one, we sent them several resources all at once to get them kind of excited and knowing about scholarships and those sorts of things. And so the last little tip here too, and we used for consistency's sake Tuskegee and Canes kind of across our presentation here today. And Canes is the College of Agriculture. We work with a couple other schools and the university as well. But in this case, there were some programs that could use some help. So they weren't necessarily struggling, but they wanted to have more students there. So we're actually talking to one of their other programs is doing really, really well. It's one of the programs that they're known for. And they came to us and said, hey, we've got enough people in this program and we love them and we're glad that they're there. But halfway through the year, they end up going to a different program. How can we help them figure out what major they need to be interested in or what major may pique their interest before they even get there? So think outside of the box. We targeted an email communication to a very popular major, which is I was talking about was vet sciences, and we're just educating them to give agribusiness a try. So some people just may not know about those programs, and it gives you the ability to be an aid to those programs that are struggling and not necessarily having the ability to meet the numbers that they want. So you actually have the opportunity to sort of help with those sorts of things. So those are just some added things. It's definitely not, they may not relate to you, but some things that we have found that help our clients in the past. So now I'm going to kind of revert back to question and answer. And I guess, Juliana, do you want to facilitate maybe some questions?
Let's do it. We had a bunch come in that I think Rebecca's done a decent job of tackling. So I'm going to focus on some of the more strategic ones that we had. One question that we got was about compliance. I don't know if you guys do much with ADA compliance or just wondering how you keep information private when people have social security numbers or other things like that that they're trying to manage.
Yeah, certainly we can talk about that. As a general rule of thumb, we're not bringing social security numbers and things like that into HubSpot. So we don't use it as the core system of record. We'll use other unique identifiers to relate that back to the SIS. So that's minimized greatly based upon just not having that type of critical data in HubSpot. That doesn't mean that wouldn't be possible to manage that and to secure those fields or to encrypt those fields, but we, as a practice, we have not done that.
Yeah.
Awesome. And feel free to keep throwing questions in the chat section as we go along. I'll keep an eye on it. Another question we had is for schools that don't necessarily focus on traditional students. So someone who, instead of focusing on a traditional freshman, might be looking at veterans or, people who are looking to go back to school. Any tips you have around how to target those if it's not a traditional enrollment cycle?
So I'll start, Alex, and you can kind of add in. I guess that kind of goes back to and really sort of knowing your audience and kind of doing those. I'm a big advocate for personas and target audiences and doing those exercises and activities to really understand where they are. So taking the time to really understand the audience before diving in and creating messaging around that is really important. So understanding where their pain points are. Maybe their pain points is they're trying just to balance doing a job and going back to school. Maybe they're nervous about it. Maybe they need financial aid. And you kind of start there. And I say hone in on those pain points and providing solutions to those pain points or even just opportunities for them to address those. And I'd say that's like a really good place to start. But it really is kind of understanding the audience before you dive in and create those strategic communications. Alex, did you want to add anything?
I mean, that's very accurate. We definitely have several clients that are, for example, MBA programs or online degree programs, and they definitely target the non-traditional student. And the ability to use, the HubSpot ecosystem to engage them is really no different than it is on the other side. It's really about understanding who your audience is and making sure you understand their communication needs and the rhythms. But the mechanics are fundamentally the same.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Any best practices specifically for those working at graduate schools out there?
Best practices. Oh gosh.
I know a lot of what we said really kind of transitions through. It's all about just transforming it to the persona that you're working with. So someone in a graduate school is going to be thinking about things well, they're already in a class somewhere, most likely. So like, how do you find those people? That's the best advice I'd have. You guys probably know better than I do.
So I'd say, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, it's knowing your audience there. But in a graduate program, you have to probably think a little bit more in traditional forms of marketing. I mean, Alex, you can kind of rebut me on that a little bit, but that may be a really good opportunity for you to sort of integrate those digital activities with the traditional activities, so you're reaching those people on a different level. They tend to have different pain points from that traditional student. Obviously, time is a really big one. So if you can deliver communications, deadlines, opportunities, scholarships in a way that's very easy for them, found SMS is a really good way to do that. So incorporating an SMS communications plan, they're on the phone, they're dropping kids off, they're going to work, they want to go to a graduate, maybe they don't have kids, but they're really busy, and they're able to get these notifications on their phone, and they can quickly see, oh my gosh, I have my application deadline coming up, or oh, look at this great opportunity for a scholarship. The link is delivered to their mobile device where a lot of people are, and boom, they click it, and they're getting this great landing page that you set up on HubSpot that's mobile optimized. And you really just want to make sure you just make it easy. I say that's the key for the graduate student. Make it easy. You want to make it easy for the traditional sort of student who's coming into undergrad. But I will say they can be a little bit more tech savvy, which doesn't really limit you at all. But it is really important to kind of just consider the needs from where they are. Direct mail, SMS, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I'd say we've done a fair amount of content strategies for grad schools, and again, it somewhat depends on what is the strategic needs of the grad school. So perhaps it's that they're competing with another grad school down the street or in the same city. So having the ability to compare your program to their program, and understanding the types of students that you typically see coming through the program and how successful they are, being able to really refine your communications around that is extremely key. The other thing I'll mention is that, depending on the type of program, if it's an MBA program, for example, oftentimes you might be targeting a career professional who is working. So being able to tie in things like account-based marketing, for example, using LinkedIn a little heavier than you would on the traditional student. There's some other ways to make sure you can amplify your message and get in front of that prospective student that way. Where your focus might be a little bit more on the attract stage than it is just a convert stage within a graduate school area. But it's definitely will flex based upon the needs of the school and what you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely.
I want to jump in quick. Sam, really great question. Says, is there a Slack group for higher ed HubSpot users so they can continue this conversation? There isn't a Slack channel, but what we're going to do following this webinar, just to keep the conversation going, because there's so many good thoughts here, is we're going to actually start a thread on HubSpot's community. So HubSpot has a community.hubspot.com. That's a user forum. We're going to start one with the recording of this, slides, etc., and we're going to send that out via the email, so you can all keep this conversation going long after this is over. I see we have like 2 or 3 minutes left. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. One other question I got that I feel like might be worth mentioning are just some best practices that are going around ads. Not sure how much you guys do with the paid space, but any tips or tricks that you've picked up along the way there, I think the group would love to hear.
So you want to take it, Alex? You want me to start?
You can start. We got 3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. You're saying that because I'll keep going on and on because there's so much you can talk about. So yes, we definitely work in the paid space. It is increasingly 100% must on your communications plan, aligning with your other digital activities you're doing, because you can, one, do custom audiences, and you can bring in people who are in a different part of the enrollment journey, a different part of the admissions process. And then you can also bring in net new people, which is always good because net new ROI is always great. A couple best practices or things that we do around there. We have sort of processes that we have internally because creating ads, around doing the messaging. Obviously, the messaging has to align to your persona. But it's really good to have sort of an internal process that you follow around creating messaging, staying on brand, and then creating those assets for messages. And then also, of course, budget comes into play as well. So I'd say definitely talk with someone, I guess, before you get started. It's a really good kind of way to help you understand where you want to start, because it can seem like such an arduous thing. So Alex, you want to kind of jump in there?
I guess I would just add, make sure that when you're using paid, don't think about it like it's out on an island. Paid is a part of the bigger ecosystem. So have a plan. So when you present an ad to a prospective, student or a company that a student may work at, make sure you well thought out what's going to be the journey once they actually interact with the ad, whether they come back to a conversion point on your website or not, because we may not always actually try to convert necessarily, at least on first touch. Perhaps you're doing that to drop a retargeting pixel in which you want to hit them with a message just a little further down the funnel later on. Just make sure you've actually sat back and thought about that full digital strategy. Don't take the bait on the ability to post an ad quickly and get views, because that alone certainly will not yield sustainable results.
Yep, I would definitely agree with that.
Juliana?
My mute was on for a second. How many times do you do that in these calls, huh? So I think we're about at time right now. I know on behalf of everyone, I'd love to say a humongous thank you for taking some time out of your day to talk to us about higher ed best practices. This has been one of the more informative sessions I have, and hopefully the first of many more like it. So thank you guys so much for taking some time to join us. We'll be sending an email out, like I said, sometime the next day or two with a recording, slides, and a link to a community thread where you guys can keep going. Cassie, Alex, I'll let you guys close it out with the last word.
Yeah, so I just want to say thanks to everyone joining. And of course, we'll join that community page on HubSpot. So if you have any questions for us, we'll try to jump in when we can. And of course, feel free to reach out to us individually. Stratagon's pretty easy to find if you got the spelling right. So reach out to Stratagon, reach out to me, send us an email. We're really open. We've been doing this for a while. So we're really, higher ed is a space that gets us excited. So thank you for the time.
Yeah, just echo everything that Cassie just said. We really appreciate the time. Hours are very, very precious these days. So thanks, and look forward to continuing the conversation on the thread.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The record